The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
The Oklahoma City Thunder getting a big win.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Thunder beating the Celtics, getting a season series sweep, winning in the Garden through adversity. SGA and his MVP case gets stronger, and the Thunder showed you why they should be respected. This was a game first and foremost between two titans of the sport, between two of the best in the NBA, and a series that should happen in June. I mean, these two teams should take care of business. Hopefully they do and get to the finals, because we would all benefit from it as just basketball fans, because the pure hoops that was on display in this game were fun to watch, and the back and forths were fun to watch. The individual chess matches of this game were fun to watch. And this is a kind of series that would be an instant classic. I think that would captivate an audience, and I think that would be good for a sport that's right now really dragged through the mud at times with the national discourse. All that out of the way to say the Thunder got a big win, and we've called almost everyone, it feels like, their most impressive win, because there's been impressive elements of all these wins for the most part in this Thunder season. I don't think it's their best win. I think that Cleveland win at home, with all that they went through to get that one, was huge. I think that this first Celtics win was huge. But man, to go on the road into the Garden and get this win, it just showed a level of maturity and a level of resolve to bounce back from that Denver loss Monday, down J-Dub, down Caruso, and get a win over a reigning champion Celtics squad. And the Thunder saw SGA play like the MVP in terms of his floor game, in terms of his leadership and his scoring ability. 34 points on 55% shooting, 2 for 7 from 3, 10 for 11 at the free throw line, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, and a steal. I thought that the Celtics defended Shea better than anyone has all season long. I mean, they sent doubles at the right time. They were able to strip him. They forced him into 5 turnovers, which is unbelievably uncharacteristic. And yet still, right, with giving Boston all of the credit in the world for throwing the kitchen sink at Shea, making life tough on Shea, and making Shea uncomfortable throughout possessions. And that's something that not a lot of teams can do, but Boston can. And the end result is still 34 points on 55% shooting in 38 minutes of work, 39 technically. So that right there tells you what you need to know. This game had a playoff level feel for both sides in terms of defensive intensity. It had a playoff level feel from both sides in terms of the coaching staffs making adjustments in game, playing their guys 39, 40 minutes like you do in the playoffs. I mean, Shea played 39 minutes. Lou Dort played 39 minutes. And you look at the other side, and Jaylen Brown fouled out at 38 minutes. Jason Tatum played 41 minutes. Al Horford played 35 minutes, 34 minutes. Derek White played 38 minutes. Like you look at these two teams, and they really shrunk the rotations and went and played ball. They went after it. And the better team tonight won. I think that the series would go 7 games between these two squads. And at that point, it's just a toss-up of who would actually win a series between these two, if we are so lucky to get that NBA Finals matchup as basketball fans. But Shea did an excellent job. But I thought the story of the game was Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren had 23 points, 15 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block. He got to the free throw line 7 times, and he got there by being aggressive off the catch, by getting downhill and getting toward the basket and forcing the issue with the officials to get to the line. He only went 4 for 7, and he's only been like a mid-70s free throw shooter this season. I think he's a better free throw shooter than that. I think he has to become a better free throw shooter than that consistently. But that was even an issue pre-hip injuries. Like that one, I don't even want to chalk up to the hip fracture, because even during that amazing stretch in the first 10 games where he looked like an all-star, that was just one hole of his game during that stretch. So the free throw stuff is interesting from him and J-Dub, because whenever they do get to the line, sometimes they leave a lot to be desired at the charity stripe. But nonetheless, to even get there showed a level of athleticism, a level of force that we've seen flashes of from Chet, but have seen the most from him on Sunday and on this game here Wednesday against Boston. And so you've seen him round into form. He shot 57% from the floor on 14 attempts. The double big lineups worked really well. We'll talk about that coming up. But for Chet, in a game that you had to have it, you had to have him step up. And that's a lot to ask of him. And I'm here to be the first one to tell you that if he didn't step up, we would be sitting here saying, well, he broke his hip. He broke his hip. And that's true. And he has that out because it's true, because it's unthinkable to put this much on him so quickly after that hip fracture. And yet he delivered. And he delivered on Sunday, even through foul trouble. When he did get to play on the floor, those spinning through the lane finishes, including that dunk into a timeout, attacking Jamal Murray off the catch at the top of the key, all that stuff was reminiscent of what you saw from Chet earlier this year, what you saw from Chet in his rookie season. And you're slowly seeing him build back to that guy. And he has 16 more games to continue to round into form for this Thunder team. But in a night where you had to have him step up, he did. And some players are like that. Some players rise to the occasion. And I truly believe Chet Holmgren is one of those players. And he rose to the occasion tonight. The Thunder still have a very tough road ahead this week. But for tonight, Chet Holmgren was awesome in his minutes along with SGA. But the 1-2 punch of Shea, Chet got the job done. The 1-2 punch of Shea, J-Dub in January against Boston got the job done. And at some point, you're going to have to respect this team. They're 54-12. Every metric tells you that they are a title contender. The only metric missing is a ring, and they can't win a ring in March. They can't win a ring until June. And look, a lot of this, you're just going to have to deal with. As a Thunder fan listening to this show, you're going to have to deal with. Because they question Boston too. They question Denver too. They question the Warriors too. Then they win and we forget all that and just crown them as the next dynasty. It's all about playing the results. But last year's team who lost in the second round is not this year's team. This is a completely different team. And you can either believe your eyes and believe what's in front of you, or you can believe that magically, come May, Josh Giddey's back on the team, Hartenstein's off the team, and they're going to resort right back to what doomed them in the playoffs a year ago. This team is so different that we don't know what this team is. The bank on them being a postseason failure because of what happened last year is just ludicrous. Especially when the constant is, like of all these changes, the constant is they still have Shea, who was excellent, who averaged 32 points, over 32 points in that series against Dallas. So it's not as though you're hoping that like Shea bounces back as a option, right? As a playoff guy. He was awesome in the playoffs. It wasn't his fault that the Thunder lost. He was the reason why they took it to 6 games. But games like tonight continue to build their resume, continue to stress test them. This was a great job by the Thunder, top to bottom, to take this challenge head on and to get a win. And there were all these little details, including the double big lineups, including SGA fighting through a great defense. Cason Wallace deserves a ton of credit. Isaiah Hartenstein was big off the bench. I mean, the Thunder didn't start 2 bigs. They worked them in during the game, but they started out with Cason and Wiggins in that starting 5. And Wiggins had his worst game of the season where, he went 0 for 9. Defensively, he's just not very good at scaling up defensively, positionally, and that's just not a part of his game. He's a good defender when it comes to guarding a guard, but any position other than a guard, he really labors on that end, and he's talked about how he's uncomfortable doing that. So when you're not hitting your shots and that's the result on the other end, it's really tough. But they overcame that. They overcame the 0 for 9 from Wiggins. They overcame not having Caruso, overcame not having J-Dub. It was all about going through these battle scars, these wars. And I know it didn't happen in April, so it doesn't count, but they still went through adversity together throughout this entire season to get to this point.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Got to have your eye on a couple underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The quarterfinal of the Big 12 tournament features Texas Tech and Baylor. Baylor needs to build their resume, but they're underdogs here. FanDuel has Texas Tech laying 5.5. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
Dominant 20-point Minnesota Timberwolves win over the Nuggets.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast.
The Wolves, of course, came into this game with a 2-0 season series lead over Denver. Having not played since late January, the Wolves had already guaranteed at least a split in the season series. And both games had come at Target Center. Remember, the last time the Wolves were in Denver was Game 7 of the second round last season, when the Wolves had that massive second half comeback. Coming into this game, the Wolves, of course, now healthy. The Nuggets missing Aaron Gordon, who's doubtful coming in with the calf injury he suffered on Sunday. It's the second straight game he's missed. And the Wolves jumped on Denver early in this one. They really did. Also, I should to further set the stage. The Wolves were in the seventh place in the Western Conference. Golden State had already won, which they just keep doing. And the Wolves needed to win to keep pace. They're in a virtual tie for 6 in the West, but they're a game back in the loss column to the Warriors. So they really needed to win to keep pace there and to stay a game and a half up on LA, the Clippers, who also won on Wednesday night. So an important game for Minnesota, to say the least. And by the way, I know there's only 16 games left. They're now only 4.5 games behind Denver for the 3 spot in the West, and they have the tiebreaker over the Nuggets. Think about that. They're only 4 games out of the 4 spot, and the Lakers, who have now lost 2 games in a row. So there's a lot still in front of Minnesota. This game was very important to keep the good vibes rolling, going into another softer spot in the schedule, a 5-game homestand upcoming. And the Wolves came out like they knew just that. They came out, jumped out to an 8-2 lead, I think it was, ultimately winning the first quarter by 8 points. The swarming defense, actually, the first quarter is probably the Wolves' worst defensive quarter overall, but there was still a lot of activity. And it was really just they missed shots early on offense. It was actually they scored the most points in the first quarter of any quarter in the game, the Wolves did. But the offense early on was a little bit disjointed. But then as things rolled through in the first quarter, and Nas got on the floor and Dante DiVincenzo got on the floor, Dante hit a couple of threes. The Wolves defense just kept, Russell Westbrook had a couple of Russell Westbrook plays in a good way for Denver early in this game that kind of kept them hanging around. Jokic scored a little bit early, but the Wolves did a really good job at making Nikola Jokic work to get anything he got, and they limited passing lanes for him. And the old make Joker score, that doesn't always work. The dude's really, really good, turns out. And yeah, he had 34 points, but you'd rather him be focused on scoring than easily dishing to teammates. And he finished with just 4 assists and 3 turnovers. The Wolves did, as I thought they would, and I noted this on Wednesday's show, is they tried to guard him with Rudy Gobert one-on-one. Outside of a foul on the Nuggets, third or fourth possession of the game, a shooting foul that Gobert committed on Jokic, and then Jokic subsequently missed both free throws. I thought he did great. He altered a bunch of shots. He blocked at least one Jokic shot in this game. I guess he was only credited with 1 block, and that was on a Jokic attempt. He made Jokic shoot over him and was physical enough with him. On the flip side, when Jokic tried to guard Julius Randle was not deterred by Joker's size. He just went right into his chest and got a couple of foul calls, yes, but it was more the idea of, I'm just going to keep going through this brick wall, and it's good. There's going to be some give to it. And I'm not going to back down from this challenge. I'm going to create a shot for myself or for teammates. And we just keep seeing really strong play from Julius Randle. But I thought the mentality on both ends, from Gobert guarding Jokic on the defensive end and Randle going at Jokic on the offensive end, was very impressive. Now, Russell Westbrook guarded Randle for stretches early in the game. As the game wore on, though, it became I mean, Westbrook was less of a factor, I thought, late in this game than he was early in the game. And the strategy had to shift a little bit with Denver down as much as they were. But the Wolves set the tone in the first kind of set of non-Jokic minutes. I think they were only like a +2 or something. But to at least win, I mean, they were like they were better than that in the Jokic minutes, like with Jokic on the floor. So to at least extend the lead a little with Jokic off the floor, that's a pretty good step in the right direction to winning the game. I thought that as the game wore on, the defensive pressure ratcheted up for Minnesota to the point where it felt like at some point in the second and third quarter that this was, what was that, game 2 of the second round of the playoffs last year, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker just hounded Jamal Murray like crazy all the way up the floor. That was happening again. Jamal Murray had 0 made shots at halftime. He had 1 point at halftime. Jamal Murray finished this game with 12 points on 15 shots. He had 8 assists, no turnovers, fine. You can live with Joker scoring 34 and have only 4 assists plus 3 turnovers, and you can live with Murray having 8 assists and no turnovers if you're holding the Joker to those 4 assists and you're holding Murray to 12 points on 15 shots and 1 of 5 on 3-point attempts, only 3 free throw attempts for Jamal Murray. A masterful job on defense for Minnesota. And Nickeil only played 16 minutes in this game, but I bet Jamal Murray felt like he was out there for every minute of it. Every minute that Murray was on the floor. A really, really impressive defensive performance, not just from Nickeil. This was total swarming by the Wolves defense. And I was actually shocked when at the end of the game, I looked at the box score. The Wolves only had 7 steals and Denver had 9 steals. Minnesota only forced 10 Denver turnovers and Denver forced 15 Minnesota turnovers. That feels completely off. Like it kind of feels backwards. But the Wolves did score more points on those 10 Denver turnovers. In fact, they scored 19 points on 10 Nuggets turnovers. That's nearly 2 points a turnover, which is insane. Whereas Denver only scored 15 points off of 15 Minnesota turnovers. The Wolves had 17 fast break points in this game. They just advantageous. They did a good job defensively. And also, like 50-50 balls, they don't show up in the box score, as it turns out. They show up in some form or fashion as offensive rebounds or steals or whatever. But tip balls, deflections don't. I bet if we pulled deflections from this game, tracking data or whatever, the Wolves are going to have 3 times as many deflections as Denver. Active hands, multiple guys going to the ball. There were only a couple of first half possessions that were a bit dicey with the Wolves having some sloppy turnovers, kind of late second quarter, I should say, where the Wolves had a double-digit lead. It got down to 9 at halftime. There was just kind of a stretch there where it felt a little dicey with how careless the Wolves were with the ball, and Denver had some fast break opportunities themselves. The Nuggets actually got to within 5 points early in the third quarter, and then all of a sudden it was just an avalanche. The Timberwolves pushed back in a big way, and that's something we've seen them do over this winning streak that, we had not seen them do a lot, earlier this season. I mean, Christian Brown had a dunk just over 10 minutes remaining in the third quarter. Wolves were only up by 5. They call a timeout. They score right out of the timeout on a Julius Randle make. Then Ant hits a tough 3. And then Jaden McDaniels hits a pair of corner 3s sandwiched around a Jamal Murray bucket, and the Wolves were up 10. They were leaving Jaden McDaniels open, and to that point, I think he had 1 basket midway through the third quarter, and then he just turned it on. They kept leaving him open, and Ant kept finding him. 2 consecutive Ant assists for Jaden McDaniels corner 3s. And then it was like the Wolves weren't really stopping Denver, but Denver was giving up wide open 3s to Minnesota's players, and between Naz Reid and Ant and Jaden McDaniels, all of a sudden this lead was up to 14 very quickly. And by the end of the third quarter, Minnesota was still up by 14 points.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Got to have your eye on a couple underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The quarterfinal of the Big 12 tournament features Texas Tech and Baylor. Baylor needs to build their resume, but they're underdogs here. FanDuel has Texas Tech laying 5.5. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
Jalen Green leads the way with 29 points as the Houston Rockets handle Kevin Durant and the Phoenix Suns. Houston Rockets getting the 111-104 win against the Phoenix Suns. That final score does not do the game justice. The Rockets handled the Suns. They were up 15 when the white flag was waved, when the reserves were all put in, and then the Suns' third stringers went off and had like a little 8-0 run in the final couple minutes of this game. So that final score does not actually do this game justice. The Rockets did a phenomenal job defensively in that fourth and final quarter, shutting things down. Budenholzer pulled KD with like 5.5, 6 minutes left in the quarter and didn't sub him back into the game. And Budenholzer waved the white flag a lot earlier than even Ime did, subbing out his main guys, his starters. But we got a lot of different angles to get into from this game. We got to talk about Jalen Green's big night, leading the way with 29 points. Welcome back, Fred VanVleet, and we mean that for real this time, seeing as how he came back. The last time he came back, he hurt his ankle or re-aggravated the same ankle a minute into the game that he was playing. So an actual return for Fred VanVleet this time. Alperen Şengün's perfect night. The wrestling match between Steven Adams and Mason Plumlee, and a few other bits and bobs from this game. But let's start with Jalen Green and his impact, because he flat out led the way for the Rockets in this one. Completely outperforming both of the all-star two guards on the other side of the aisle for the Phoenix Suns. Jalen Green finished the night 29 points, 8 of 16 shooting, 3 of 6 from three-point range, 10 of 11 at the free throw line. Did a great job getting to the charity stripe in this game. 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, couple turnovers, plus 16 in his 37 minutes. Jalen Green completely outplayed both of Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. Beal led the way for the Suns with 25 points on 9 of 14 shooting, had 3 assists, no rebounds. And then Devin Booker, 19 points on 7 of 15 shooting, few rebounds, 4 assists, couple turnovers. But this just felt like a really good all-around scoring game from Jalen Green. He got off to a hot start early, had 11 points in the first quarter. He and Dillon Brooks got the Rockets off to a great offensive start. Dillon hit a couple threes early, had a little midi fading shot. Dillon's midi was on point in this game too. Dillon with 19 points, 8 of 14 shooting. But for Jalen, had that hot start and then turned it up again in the third quarter where he's had 14 of his 29. And this was a good kind of like 3-level scoring game for Jalen Green, where he really was getting it done beyond the 3-point line. He was knocking down some mid-range shots. He was getting to the rim. He was getting to the free throw line. And when Jalen has these types of really all-around scoring performances, it's really hard to find a way to stop him, right? He's a guy that his weakness oftentimes has been the outside shooting is the thing that has kind of held him back. This year, it really feels like he's leveled up as far as his finishing in and around the basket, really utilizing his athleticism. We know he's got the lightning quick first step and the explosiveness to be able to get past anybody guarding him one-on-one on the perimeter. And then, using that insane athleticism of his to elevate and finish above and around defenders in and around the basket. And for a Phoenix Suns team that, number one, struggles defensively, the Suns team, their defense is just Swiss cheese. That's been their problem all year long. They just do not have a good defensive team, a good defensive mindset even. There were multiple possessions in this game where the Suns just fell asleep at the wheel and gave wide open backdoor cuts, or just flat out, just lost a guy defensively and gave up easy buckets right at the rim. But Suns were missing Nick Richards in this game, so Mason Plumlee starting in place of him. The Suns had no rim protection in this game. They've got some length on their roster, right? They've got Kevin Durant, they've got Bol, and they've got some decent-ish defenders here and there. Royce O'Neal, Ryan Dunn are solid perimeter defenders, but this Suns team does not have, a good defense to begin with, and they don't really have the individual defenders to adequately slow down Jalen Green, and he absolutely took advantage of that in this game. And when he has this aggressive mindset of getting downhill and attacking, even after, a couple, early, getting the ball poke checked away and losing it on a drive, or getting, blocked once or twice at the rim, keeping that aggressive mentality is key for Jalen Green, and attacking and also forcing the issue, right? Getting to the free throw line. We ran the stat, on an episode, I don't know, a few weeks back, where when Jalen Green gets to the free throw line 6 or more times, not even hits 6 free throws, but gets to the free throw line 6 or more times. The Rockets, I think at the time I had the record at like 12-4 or something when Jalen attempts 6 or more free throws. So him getting to the charity stripe 11 times is huge. Him being a rhythm guy and a scorer and just seeing the ball go through the hoop is huge for him. And it helps unlock so much more of his game. But on top of that, it's just the decision making. And that's been the biggest kind of element of growth for Jalen this year, has been his ability to really read how defenses are guarding him, how they're playing his teammates, and understanding when and where. Okay, they're going under the screen, so I'm gonna pull for 3. Okay, they're playing up on me. I'm gonna drive and I'm gonna attack. I'm gonna collapse. Okay, they're sending 2. They're showing a crowd. Where are my kickout passes? And this felt like easily one of the best offensive performances from Jalen Green this season, because it felt like he was just in control all game long. It never felt like it didn't feel like at any point that the Suns defense was speeding him up or, forcing him into ill-advised shots. Like, there was never a singular point where I thought to myself, okay, that was a bad look, or that was a drive that, you drove directly into 2 or 3 defenders, or, you should have kicked it out for this guy to shoot an open shot. None of that. This was just a 10 out of 10 decision-making performance from Jalen Green. So again, leading the way with 29 points, did have 4 assists mixed in there, had a few steals as well. And one of the ancillary benefits, and we'll talk about Fred's impact and his return to action as well, but one of the ancillary benefits of having Fred VanVleet back is I feel like it takes a lot of that pressure off of Jalen Green, right? Fred has a very calming influence and impact on the entire roster, but I think it really helps Jalen knowing that he has his backcourt partner back in action and can, rely on Fred to initiate the offense, to get the Rockets into their sets, and that it doesn't have to be Jalen Green walking the ball up every single time, initiating the offense. Jalen can be played a little bit more off ball at times. He can, be the recipient of some passes rather than having to initiate all of the offense, as oftentimes the only legitimate ball handler on the floor in the absence, or when Fred VanVleet was out. So just a really strong game for Jalen Green. Rockets picking up their 4th win in a row. And hey, beating the Phoenix Suns is always really nice because the Rockets own the Suns draft picks. Welcome back, Fred VanVleet, for real this time, right? Because he came back before, and I'll be honest, that performance was not a very inspiring performance. And unfortunately, we were all under the impression, at least originally, he's back and he's just playing awful. But he came back, he rolled his ankle, and that's why he was really bad in that one game back, and then he had to sit out some more games. So it was great to see Fred VanVleet out there in action again. Finished the night with 10 points on 4 of 9 shooting, 2 of 6 from downtown, had a couple rebounds, had 4 assists, 4 steals, 0 turnovers, was a plus 16 in his 28 minutes of action. And talked about it a little bit there in segment 1, what Fred does for Jalen Green. But Fred just, again, he just has this calming influence on the entire Rockets roster. He has the ability to get the Rockets into their sets. He's one of the best communicators on the team. And I do think at least from a defensive perspective, the Rockets definitely missed having Fred, because he doesn't just help organize the offense. He also helps keep the defense on its toes. The Rockets have a lot of guys up and down the roster that are vocal defenders, guys that call things out. But 2 of the most vocal guys on the team are actually Jabari Smith Jr. and Fred VanVleet. And even though the Rockets have a lot of really great, staunch defenders up and down the roster, those 2 guys are routinely calling out things and yelling and communicating with their teammates the most. And so losing both of them at the same time, I think really did do a number on the Rockets defense. Fred is he's just a really impactful guy, right? Fred's impact goes well beyond what you see on the stat sheet. And weirdly enough, it's almost like Fred is the Rockets' like emotional support point guard. Like, he really is this team's emotional vocal leader. Like, he is the floor general, and he is the, I don't want to say Fred is like the heart and soul of this Rockets team, but he kind of is, right? Like, they lean on him as like the big brother. He's the guy that taught them all how to win and how to play winning basketball, and having him back does so much for the confidence of these young guys up and down the roster. Even though Fred's actual on-court production, especially this season, has wavered here and there, and he's had some bad games, he's also had some phenomenal and some really good games. He's just a stabilizing force for this team. And there's nobody on the roster that can do what Fred VanVleet does, in large part just taking care of the basketball. Talked about the Rockets having 25 assists on 40 made shots, but limiting their turnovers was huge in this game. And that's what Fred does. Despite 5 turnovers from Alper and Şengün, which we'll talk about the turnovers too from Şengün. But despite the 5 turnovers from Şengün, only 9 turnovers as a team. And a big part of that is the security of having Fred out there to handle the basketball, of having him out there to take some of the pressure off of Jalen Green, of having him out there to help initiate sets for the Rockets and get guys going. And the biggest thing to me is this Rockets team has so much talent. And when the young talent is firing on all cylinders the way that it was in this game, with Jalen Green leading with 29, Şengün's perfect night, 20 points on 7 of 7 shooting. We'll talk about his performance in a minute too. Dylan Brooks absolutely cooking, 19 points. Tari with 15. So all starters in double figures. But I think there was a tendency at times when Fred was out that the Rockets would put together a really good stretch, and then they would give up a really bad stretch, right? They would put together a really good stretch, and then they wouldn't be able to kind of just keep things going smoothly. And that's what Fred really helps with.